All right. More people will probably trickle in, but I want to thank everyone for taking the time out of their Tuesday. Here we are in July of 2024. The timestamp is important. We're talking about things today that can change quite swiftly. And so despite the best effort to make sure that this content is pertinent and maybe long lasting, when we talk about artificial intelligence and when we talk about ethics, perhaps more generally, you have to be prepared for updating. So July 2024, this may need to be updated depending on if you're not watching this live. But for those that are live, hello, my name is Tim Fuller. I am going to deliver today's content on behalf of CentralReach and CentralReach's Institute, for which I am very proud to be a part of. And although it is my face that you are having to watch this morning, just know that behind this in the Institute, but throughout CentralReach more generally, I have the great privilege of working with a really incredible group of behavior analysts with a wide ranging level of expertise and experience in our discipline. And I again so fortunate to get to work with them. I have one of my trusted and great colleagues, Kelly King, in the back of the house here to help answer any questions, along with some wonderful help from Sarah as well, as it may relate to administrative efforts and things of that nature. So thanks to both of them for being here. What I'd like to do, and what my intention in doing, is to orient, self included, to how artificial intelligence is being employed inside the medical model and inside of ABA specifically. Now, that's not to suggest that all of applied behavior analysis is medically necessary. The scope of our applied discipline is much broader than just that caveat. But I do think that it is an important compass bearing to observe, given our alignment within the medical model. It can give us a great sense of perspective on where we might employ and develop these AI tools in service to those that we serve, but also to ourselves and the organizations with which we find ourselves in. In addition to that orientation, also drawing attention to our ethical obligations to assist in making informed decisions about AI use. I think that we, however many people are here, in combination with all of the various, kind of information sources you may have already been in contact with, which I have already been in contact with. There may be overlap with those, but given the rapid pace with which much of this content in artificial intelligence is moving, there's no way to orient to everything. There's things that you have read, seen, heard that I have not, and I'm sure that is true on the other side. That is not a moral statement, meaning it is not good or bad. It's just an acceptance of what is, in that no one could know all of the things that are going on, even the people that are intimately involved in developing large language models, and then those that benefit from that development as well. And lastly, to outline our responsible use and development of these AI tools. So I bring this distinction of both the use of these tools, but also the development of tools that may be employed by behavior analysts like yourselves. And that being that, we both have responsibility in this, both the users of these tools, I am a user of large language models. I use them in my day-to-day work. And it also is used in the development of these tools that can be later employed by you, the user. And so I am speaking today from not only as a behavior analyst, but also as a behavior analyst that works for a vendor whose primary job is creating technology that is then used by our discipline. And so there is a difference in vantage, a difference slightly perhaps in perspective. We'll talk a little bit about how to balance some of those perspectives in that case. But make no mistake, we all have responsibility in this, in the use of them, in the development of them, and I hope today to outline what that can look like in a way that I think is aligned with our values here inside of behavior analysis. So that's the agenda. Not always good to define things about what they're not, but darn it, I'm going to do it anyway. So I want to talk a little bit about what today is and maybe what today is not, at least in our hour together here in July. What it is not is it's not a demo. I'm not going to be demoing. One, that's not ethical to do if you're going to be providing continuing education units, specifically in the ethics kind of thing. So it's probably good to avoid that. But that's really not the purpose of today. Yes, CentralReach makes products you or your organization can buy. And I'm not going to, we're not going to hide away from that. And I directly benefit from that. Right? I work for CentralReach. This is my employer. But I'm not here to demo these kinds of things. We have an incredible group of professionals that can work through and provide you a demo for your organization. If you're interested in that, don't hesitate in reaching out. We're happy to share what we're up to. And we love working with organizations that want to help shape what these products look like. And we are very grateful to them for their early adoption. And so if you're interested in these things, do not hesitate in reaching out. So although today is not really designed to highlight products within CentralReach's product line, that is by no means a discount of what is available to you. We will make sure that is accommodated. That's your interest. This is also not my professional advocacy corner. This is not a place for me to share my strong opinion and sort of situate that inside of some kind of expertise. I'm not going to fool you that way. If I have a personal opinion as artificial intelligence, especially as it relates to its widely available commercial use, not too long ago, I mean, this thing has been going on for quite a while, certainly inside of the medical discipline. They've been working with this for years, but these tools have not been widely available to us, the day-to-day users, until relatively recently. And so, the scholarship that can help formalize and organize many of our professional opinions, frankly, isn't there yet. That's not to discount the scholarship that has already gone on inside of this space, even within behavior analysis. Great credit to those that are out there in front of that. But this is not a place for me to provide my professional advocacy and somehow kind of shade that as some kind of expertise. I'm going to be very clear about what is and then what might be my opinion. And I hope that other scholars and other experts participating in this space would do the same, frankly. So I want to make very clear that I will do my best effort to distinguish if I do get on a little bit of a soapbox, which is entirely possible, that you as a listener to this would know that, okay, Tim's just kind of spouting off a little bit. And this is also not just related to ABA or to AI. Now, that's usually, that's the content here, but a thread through all of this is that this is kind of a conceptual orientation to this type of ethical issue. And this type of ethical issue, I think, would broadly fit under the umbrella of the use of technology, the role of technology, the responsibility of technology developers inside of different professional spaces. And so, although we will use this to highlight the topic of the day, I think that the themes throughout this could be employed in other areas as well. And so even if you find yourself only with a cursory interest of AI, I do hope that there would be value in this beyond just the title of today's presentation. So what are we going to do? Well, it's an attempt to situate behavior analytic ethics, in a space that is moving quickly. And that is not just a kind of a personal opinion, as I'm trying to relate to that. This artificial intelligence, from the use of it and to its various ways that individuals are interacting with it, from a technological perspective, is faster than what we've seen elsewhere. That's not to discount the rapid advancement of mobile technology or other kind of technology advancement. But we find ourselves at a moment where the pace and rapidity of change in this space and how it's being employed and applied is very, very quick. And it is an unregulated space. That's not to suggest, and we'll review some of those in the not too distant future, that's not to suggest that there are no regulations. But we find ourselves a little bit on the back foot in terms of legal guidance. And that doesn't just go for us as practitioners, but also insurance providers and payers. And a wide host of things in that regard. So we want to kind of situate our ethics inside of something that is shifting and moving quite quickly. And also organize provider and vendor efforts to better be in service to those we serve. This is something that I personally feel very strongly about, but also something I'm really proud to let people know that goes on at CentralReach, that all the way at the top, all the way from Chris and everyone who gets to do this, there has been an absolute mandate that we do not lose sight of the people who are served by behavior analysts. Yes, behavior analysts are our customers, but who are they in service of? And that is who we want to make effort in terms of progress. And so that is something that is at the forefront of not only the product professionals that are working on these tools, the engineering professionals that do have behavior analytic background. Make no mistake, although they may not be behavior analysts, they are very clear on the use case of behavior analysis, and again, those that we serve. And so that's important to me. So during the recent Association for Behavior Analysis International Conference in Pennsylvania, in Philly, I was part of a symposium. We were asked by the symposium organizers to answer the question, the likelihood that artificial intelligence would automate the role of a behavior analyst. Kind of a provocative idea. It's sort of like, oh, is this going to take away what is essentially ours? And we were asked to answer that question. I will share with you my answer, which was shared by the other panelists or the other symposium participants in this, that it is no. If only given your options of yes and no, it's better to be on that side because it's a more positive way of thinking. That's not to discount those that may think, yes, I think it will do that. I don't agree with you. But that wouldn't be the first time. I may be wrong. Okay. Little tongue in cheek there. But I do say no with a caveat, with an asterisk here. And that is primarily because we must maintain our analytic responsibility. If we do not maintain and clearly distinguish what can be of service to us in our work without taking over our work, if we do not keep a strong, very laser focused on that distinction, we might see things that encroach on our analytic responsibilities, which we should push back on. We have to be clear as a discipline what those responsibilities are, the scope of those responsibilities. We have to remain skeptical, but also curious, I would argue. Again, that's a personal opinion about how we navigate that space. But let's not be naive at that. I don't think it would come within. I don't think there would be a behavior analyst necessarily that would do that. But behavior analysis, and certainly the work with autistic people, is by no means only served by behavior analysts. And technologists are out there, and without the regulatory standards to help guide and put parameters and guardrails around what they will do, they are asking big questions, and they have the means, the funds to do so. There is wild stuff going on in artificial intelligence, and you can interpret wild as a good thing or a bad thing. I am not here to say one way or the other. I have my own personal feelings about that, but it is a very, very interesting space. Hard to keep up with, frankly, and so I kind of have to narrow my purview because there's a lot of efforts going on out there to do work in this space, and they are asking big questions. And some of them may, in fact, encroach on your analytic responsibilities. And you will have to, the collective you, the we in this case, we must maintain what those analytic responsibilities are. And I think we can do that. We're a strong discipline. We have a strong foundation, both experimentally, conceptually, and applied. We have what we need to maintain what our good things are, the good work that we will do. And I'll also provide an example of, I don't think that's going to happen. But before I do, let me give you your first secret word of the day. Not a secret any longer. The word is perspective. The first word today, perspective. All right. Now, here's why I don't necessarily think we have to worry too much about AI coming in and taking your job. Well, one, and before I provide the visual, is because it's trained on what we did. It's us. It's trained on us. And we make mistakes. So does it. And let me give you an example of a mistake. I wanted to create a visual for that conference presentation. I'll share it with you now. And what I wanted it to do is so I asked ChatGPT. This was the 4.0 large language model on offer. It's the most current that they have. There are other large language models that I use. Love Claude, Juliet, Gemini. There's lots of different tools out there. But I asked ChatGPT, and I said, create for me a visual, a PowerPoint template to be specific. I wanted to continue. I wanted the title to be the Paranoia Comfort Continuum. And I wanted the furthest left-hand side to say fear. And I wanted the furthest right-hand side to say unbridled. And this is what I got. Now, look, I love a good visual, but I'm not great at creating. And this is better than I would do, though I do spell better than it does. But for those that know me well, also know that, sometimes I can have challenges. But I wouldn't necessarily have had that kind of challenge, big challenge. So I said, let's do it again. This is what it gave me. Bold, okay, but better than I can produce, certainly. But it's a little weirder. Okay, so I asked to do it again. All right, now we have a vertical act along with a horizontal act. Now there's an arrow. I didn't ask for any arrows. I gave you the prompt that I said that it did, and this is what it. Now it's getting even weirder. Now I have a trend line. I didn't ask for a trend line. I got percentages. I don't even know where they're getting that from. And one of the reasons why, and this is a little tongue in cheek, and I'm not trying to bash ChatGPT by any means. It's pretty remarkable what it can do. But there are also things that it just doesn't do well, and they know it. One of the reasons why it did so poorly in this task is because it cannot see. I asked it to do something it is not really prepared to do. Let's be very clear about what large language models do, at least presently, and what they could do. Now, to a technologist that may find themselves further and further on the right-hand side, thanks again to my wonderful colleague Kelly, who made this for me in service of that presentation on Canvas, I think. But let's say we go to the farthest left-hand side, the unbridled, or the right-hand side, unbridled optimism. Everything is possible. They get a lot of attention, certainly in the media, and their motivation is probably clear. They're probably directly tied to the development of large language models and their use by a wider population of people, and they have a great deal of promise inside of those. But let's not forget that they're thinking about the future. They're not necessarily thinking about present state. That is not a naiveness of them. It's just their choice of perspective and where they want to find themselves. And technologists often overpromise and underdeliver, but the criticism that they would probably put back on me is that, well, that's what you think of now, but I'm not thinking in your time scale. I'm thinking in a much broader one. Convenient argument, hard to argue against it. Not a great debate strategy because it has flaws. But I don't like to necessarily give them, I like to listen, but I don't necessarily like to give them outsourced attention. Just as I also am not sort of compelled by the doomsday side on the furthest left hand, where it's just fear. This is all ending, all encompassing. I don't hear too much of that, but I also don't orient to it very often, but I also don't want to discount it. And the reason why I bring this up is that you are on this continuum. Wherever you find yourself on this continuum, I'm on this continuum, my colleagues are on this continuum, the general population and public are on this continuum. And it's important to acknowledge that where you are and that where you are can change. It is not a set in stone, this is where I am. This moves around. You're going to find something like, wow, that was pretty helpful. I really like that. And maybe you move a little closer to the right. And then we hear a terrible news story about a misdiagnosis of a child that led to some medical catastrophe for the family. And that becomes very fearful. And so we slide back and forth. And the reason we slide back and forth is because we're human beings. And that's a completely valid thing to do. And so I invite you, as you kind of consider, and I hope that you do, where you might find yourself on this continuum, don't discount someone else's position on the continuum. Their position is equally as valid as yours. Now, sometimes on the distribution, the tail ends of the distribution, they might get outsized attention. Fear sells, and so does unbridled optimism. Sometimes these subtle and nuanced positions that are more inside of the middle don't often get as much attention, but they are no less equivalently valid as any of the other. And so even if your perspective may not be getting a lot of attention, take comfort, if possible, in knowing that it is an equally valid position and you're probably guarantee you're not alone. And I also necessarily wouldn't make it mean anything if you're in disagreement with others or if you find yourself shifting uh, on that continuum. Okay, off that slight soapbox for now. Without saying, what I'm advocating for here is that we exercise some balance, curious, skeptical orientation to all of these views. No one of these views is right or necessarily wrong, not a moral question necessarily, but I think if we can approach it with some balance and some curiosity, we'll find ourselves in a better position to make informed decisions for ourselves, for our organizations, and ultimately for those that we serve. Now, in simplest terms, I think we have two paths as a discipline when it comes to artificial intelligence. The first is to take us further away from things and events, meaning our subject matter. We want to be clear and technical, the whole organism interacting in and with its environment. These are the things and events of interest to us behavior analysts. So we could take that. I would caution us taking that path. I certainly wouldn't be participating in that path. So let us consider the second path. And again, this is in the simplest terms. Every path has many little tentacles and things of that nature. And so sometimes you don't know exactly where you are in that path. But the second, broad terms, would permit us closer contact with things and events and would promote refinement in our discipline. Now, whether you're a researcher, whether you're into the conceptual analysis of behavior, or whether you're probably more like most of us in the applied discipline, if we're in closer contact with those things, it permits us the opportunity to refine, and within refinement, the goal being better outcome. We do better. Whatever better is, we do that. And that's that second path. And obviously, I think you would probably know where I would be advocating. And furthermore, I doubt that very many people would have chosen the former. Most of us would find ourselves in the second. Okay, I can get on board with that. I can get on board with the idea that this technology is not going anywhere. And so it probably behooves us to either participate in the development of this technology so that we do not relinquish our analytic responsibilities, but also the control of our own destiny and discipline about where we want to go, even knowing that as a science, there's really no direction other than to say perhaps better description, better orientation to our subject. So one other caveat, again, because I would be advocating for a more nuanced position, is that, of course, if we're going to take these two broad paths and we're going to choose, I'm right-handed, so I'm right-handed bias. See, I'm detecting bias in this regard, but let's say to our left-handed, my wife, left. Let's say the good path. Now, let's say we go down that path with all of the promising intentions that it would take us closer in contact with things that would bring us closer to our subject matter, enhance our analytic responsibilities and duties, and better serve those that we work with. But sometimes when we're down a path, you don't know, even though you have the best intention, that it's actually leading you the other way. And so we need continuous measurement, which is something we're quite skilled in, to ensure that it's bringing us down that path. So the first point is that even if we're in the camp of unbridled optimism and we move quickly into some really ambitious using of large language models, that we maintain a clear monitoring system that would let us know which path that we're on, and that if we were to accidentally or find ourselves on the path we do not feel comfortable being on, that we would discontinue. That people discontinue things all the time. It's not to suggest that discontinuing things means that you didn't learn anything. Far from it. In fact, you probably learned more from that than you did from the success that you might have had going down the other path. So, nuanced in this regard, and an advocacy of strong monitoring and measurement so that we are in continual participation with how we're using these tools. We don't let go of that. Second word, continuum. First one, perspective. Second one, continuum. This is an ethics CU. You want to write this down. All right. Before we dive too much into applied behavior analysis and what's going on in our space, let's take a look at what traditional medicine is up to. And let's think about, where are they? Now, it's probably important to, provide some important distinction. This is my orientation to traditional medicine. This is, surgical doctor, family practice, doc. It's a big discipline. They have a lot of resources. And in one area, they're using things in medical imaging and diagnostics. When a discipline as refined as medicine is, they become more oriented to the various factors contributing to their subject matter. Let's say their subject matter is disease. Well, because the medical discipline has refined considerably in its evolution, they are in contact with or are in consideration of a great deal of factors that contribute to their subject. And as a result, the burden that it would place on an individual to consider all of those factors and the interrelation among those factors is more than a human can do. We do not have the computing power. But guess what does? LLMs do. They're a big hammer. It's a big computer hammer. And you, human being, not a big hammer. Incredible what you can do as a human being. LLMs cannot do it. They can fake it in some instances. But what they can do is they can brute force data. They can push things around. And when you've got a lot of data, which the medical discipline does, and their data is highly refined, it has really clear parameters, there's uniformity and consistency, with some caveats, obviously. I'm speaking in somewhat broad generalizations. They're going to employ it, and they're employing it with some great deal of success. Does that mean they get it all right? No. Why? Because they're trained on our work, human beings' work, and we don't always get it right. This brings up an idea of automation for me, and I think let's take a slight detour. Let's go back to behavior analysis and give some idea about perhaps the threats of automation and what that might mean for us. But take as a piece of evidence in our own history, one of the greatest contributions to automation and data collection, which then itself led to some of the greatest observations of uniform patterns of behavior, and that is the development of the cumulative record. When B.F. Skinner designed the cumulative record to accurately and automate the data collection process of the experimental processes he was working on, primarily schedules of reinforcement, incredible opportunities were found. It completely reshaped the experimental analysis of behavior. No longer were we subject to the kind of T-mazes or runway mazes that were being used previously that required a reset. The free operant opportunity to observe and monitor the behavior in real time and across larger spans of time permitted a pretty incredible explosion of refinement in the analysis of behavior. It is credited as being one of the biggest contributions to psychological science, and that's not from behavior analysis. There's a reason B.F. Skinner was voted by peers of the psychological sciences as the most important psychological scientist of the 20th century. I think Time magazine did this at the turn of the 20th century, and that is because of what Skinner did in this regard. I don't think in any small measure we can see that automation is not necessarily a bad thing. It's experimentation. It's curiosity. What can it lead us to? And if you have a good question, if it's formed around a strong conceptual foundation, then you're going to ask questions that lead you down a path of learning. And so I use this example of that maybe if we find ourselves more fearful of what automation could do, we look at our own past and seeing what automation in the past has done for us. Okay, back to medicine. Also, I have a full reference list for all of these. These are all just kind of general statements, but this is not new. Some of these references go all the way back to 2016, which is not that long ago, frankly, but in this space it is. But traditional medicine in the medical environment, again, given their resources and also essentially the same thing that we're up to in terms of a goal, in terms of treatment goal. Obviously, the topography is slightly different, but we have some alignment in that. They have been leveraging these tools for a long time, relatively speaking. But inside of the pharmaceutical discipline, again, talk about a discipline that has a great deal at risk. It takes a lot of money to develop drugs, and they get a lot of data. And so, well, if you have a lot of data and you want to do something with it, it's not just a good idea. Explore what an LLM might be able to do with that. It has enormous computing power, and now it's becoming remarkably available to a lot of us. you can perhaps hear a little bit in my own voice about where I find myself on that continuum. Not unbridled optimism. I'm too pessimistic for that, but it's not fearful either. Probably a little closer, which might make me a little kind of boring, but whatever. But the other part of this is the personalized medicine side of things. So not only are they collecting a large array of data, but we also know, and again, kudos to the medical discipline, no longer is cancer treated in the same way that it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. It's very personalized. And that's just one example. And one of the reasons it's becoming more personalized is, one, their detection is becoming much more subtle. It's becoming much more nuanced and much more appropriate for you as the individual. And they just have more tools at their disposal because they've been continually developing those tools. And despite whatever affection we may have for our tools of the trade, our clickers, our timers, things like this, which, not saying go away, and I have them myself, my clicker right here, frankly, timer right there, that, we haven't had a great deal of robust development inside of things that help us do better. And I think we would like to do better. I think that if you were to ask any behavior analyst, as satisfied as they may be with the outcomes they produce, I think a lot of us would organize around the idea of, yeah, but I think we could do better in that regard. And whatever that better is, today's not the topic to dissect what better is necessarily, but I think we would all perhaps organize around that side of things. Now, obviously, there's a lot of administrative effort going on in this, in the electronic health records and predictive analytics side of things. Predictive analytics has more to do perhaps on the clinical side, if that's where you're thinking about it, but also from the business side of things. Medicine is a business. ABA, it's not a free cert. As you guys all know, it's expensive to do this. It's expensive to get the training expertise, provide supervision, all of the administrative and compliance regulatory standards that we find ourselves in, which is a good thing, and we'll talk about them. Right? We can benefit from predictive analytics. Maybe we don't want to do that right now for a clinical side of things, and maybe it's not the royal we, maybe it's you and your organization and your colleague, but maybe you want to use the predictive analytics on the business side of things. Many behavior analytic organizations were not originally started by business people. They were started by behavior analysts that wanted to serve a particular community or population. And then they had to be thrust into that entrepreneurial or business side of things. And so help in that direction is potentially a good thing. Now, I don't necessarily think in behavior analysis we're going to move swiftly into the area of robotics, but I could see a future where that might be possible as that technology becomes more readily available and cheaper to us. But certainly inside of the medical discipline, what they can do with robotic-assisted surgery, how they can do things not only remotely from very far away, but the precision with which a doctor can now do things because of the assistance of essentially large language models, is pretty remarkable. There's some pretty wild videos out there on the internet of what medicine is doing, and some of it is unbridled optimism. That's fine. But these are real doctors. These are real surgeons with lots of experience who are saying, hey, whatever I can do to be better at this, meaning that the person is healthier, they recover better, they live, they're curious about that. And they would like to see that being possible. So there's something to be learned there as we look into the medical. And again, all of these have peer-reviewed publications behind them, several of them, in fact. And so at the end of the presentation, you'll see it really quickly, but please reach out, tim.fuller@centralreach.com. That's my email address. I can pass along resources. Obviously, remote patient monitoring and telehealth, that's going on there. And then there's a lot to do in terms of the natural language processing in healthcare. What that can look like is, talking to a very specific chatbot, for example, as a patient. Maybe you have questions. Maybe the questions that you would have otherwise gone to WebMD, and you're, the sort of that game. It's not a game. Type in your symptoms of WebMD, and you'll come back, and it's like you're gonna die. Speaking tongue in cheek in that regard, but what if it looked like you could get a more personalized answer? All of the wealth of information is there, but perhaps you could leverage it into something that is more personal and pertinent to you in your circumstance. And so instead of having the experience of talking with a search bar and just having to use the discretion of, okay, I'll click on that link and oh, I don't have medical training. I'm not that kind of doctor. But what if it looked like you had a chatbot that was trained on all of that material and it walked you through in a conversational style towards this thing that could help inform your action and had really clear guardrails of when it said, this is moving into territory where it sounds like you need to speak with your primary care physician. I don't have one. Well, here, I've looked up where you can find one in these kinds of things. So again, an assistant in a way that moves you to more effective action. That's something worth exploring, and it is being explored extensively inside of medicine. This is not just new things. These things are being employed right now inside of that, helping doctors, helping patients, helping administrators, something for us to consider. And it's all being done inside of a regulatory climate that is, I'm not going to say turbulent because I think that has negative connotations, but it is ever evolving. And there's not a lot of regulation inside of this space. Now, yes, you could say, what about this or what about that? We can do the what about. That's fine. I think that's a good conversation to have. But let's just step back for a little bit and let's look at what are the general principles that a lot of these regulatory initiatives are trying to capture. This is my distillation of that observation. I think you can add to this list, you can refine it, you can bring more into it. This is just what I sort of arrived at in this regard. And I think top of mind is the emphasis on transparency and explaining exactly how AI is embedded in a particular tool. I think that that is something that informs my work here at CentralReach. My colleagues in general, they would organize around that idea. Transparency is key. And in regulatory efforts, we're seeing that in terms of where is it, what is happening, and having a really clear roadmap of what this tool is built on, its infrastructure. It is requiring, in some instances, some technical savvy that many of us do not have. It has been a rapid crash course for me in terms of some of these kinds of things, and I have to do better myself. I'm having to learn things so that I can be a more informed developer or participant in the development of these tools. And that's an exciting thing, but it can also be a little challenging and sometimes uncomfortable because that's not really my area. There's also a lot of requirements for validation and making sure that you are monitoring the performance of this tool. Something that if you are using any one of CentralReach's early products that's available to customers, something that you know well is being employed with the things that we're building. Whether that's in the form of dashboard that are not only internally monitoring the use of these, but also inside of your individual organization so that it gives you the vantage to see how things are going. And then certainly the data privacy and security part of things. Although things like the GDPR in Europe and also HIPAA here in the United States have specific carve-outs talking about electronic use of it, a lot of that ports over to the use of artificial intelligence. And so it may not have artificial intelligence in its name, but the use of that tool is not unlike the use of other electronic, whether data records or data management services and things like that. And there are some guardrails and parameters in place. It's not fully the Wild West as it comes to PHI and things like that, which is a good thing. The other thing, the last one that I think is important to call out is the potential biases in these AI systems. And the developers of these large language models are not naive to this. These are incredibly sophisticated professionals that know them, that monitor them, and want attention to be brought to that so that it can be better. This is a pretty cool time to be watching the space because it feels, at least as an observer, that not too many deep roots have been set, that there's opportunity to continue to shift and change, but we have to participate in that shift and change, and we have to be able to call out what we're not liking when we're seeing it. Now, we do have some specific regulatory examples. In March of this year, the EU Parliament did pass their AI Act. I haven't read it in exhaustive, but one of the things that I thought was pretty cool was their tiered system of things that they will not allow inside of their regulatory parameters and things that they will allow. And, at the top of the list where the wording was subliminal techniques of behavior change. Something to that effect, but the subliminal techniques was the thing that I thought, Again, that goes back to the transparency side of things. So we do have examples, the EU moving faster than the US, for example. The World Health Organization and the US have published guidelines, whether that be from the FDA, from the White House. There's also been congressional statements that have been made, but there have been no federal laws to date that has specifically targeted artificial intelligence. We do have states like California and their Privacy Rights Act that have standards for PHI use, storage, distribution. And so that implicates AI's use, and we monitor and maintain that. We also have individual states. These are the ones that I know of: New York, Illinois, Washington, Vermont, Massachusetts. They have proposed legislation. And so uh, I think there's some payer kind of attempts at regulating things. We have to be a little careful with that. We have to watch if insurance companies get to dictate what the regulations are. Keep in mind, they are using this technology, and they're using this technology to their benefit. Why wouldn't they? It behooves them to do so. And so I don't work for an insurance company. I don't know exactly all the ins and outs of that, but it is not hard to see how the use of AI tools corresponds and correlates very, very clearly with the uptick in rejection of reimbursement and in the increase in auditing. It's easier for them to audit now. And that's not just because of magic. That's because they're like, oh, these tools are available. How can we use them? How can we use them within the parameters that we already have set for ourselves? I'm going to move swiftly through the rest of this. As I can see, I've been bloviating too much, but we're making good progress on the content side of this. In ABA, this slide was borrowed from our director of AI development and Dave Stevens. I've made some individual adjustments. You can see a 2x2 matrix on the vertical axis. We have adoption effort. It's easy to adopt. It's not very challenging versus high effort. And on the horizontal axis, we have development effort. How hard is it for us what are the resource costs? What do we need to learn? What kind of tools do we have to employ and contract out with to do that? It's very expensive. Good luck trying to build your own LLM. You can do it, but spend some time with the ones that are already available. It's pretty good in some instances. But you can kind of populate your efforts, and so I'll populate a few here. Low effort, user-approved summarization narrative. Yeah, there is some debate as to whether or not that's ethical. It is ethical given our guidelines that you can assist in the drafting and development of a clinical note, whether you're a BCBA, an RBT, or something like that. The medical profession has been doing this for years. Their tools and sophistication of this is quite remarkable. You have to follow those kind of transparency and the monitoring efforts, and you have to be really clear if you're interested in that. I can walk you through at another time exactly our quality assurance metrics, the heavy hand of people involved in looking at that kind of thing. But that's low effort, both on the development side and the adoption effort. There's a lot of models to use in this, and you can do them in a safe and ethical way. You can also populate things in terms of building report narrative. We talk a little bit about automation. Lest we forget, we've had 15 or so years of automated assessment reports. There was some kerfuffle when those became available, but lots of people use them and to great effect. Why? Because a lot of times in terms of producing a particular report, I won't call any one particular out, but there's a lot of information in there that gets reused from time to time, and then it focuses your attention on the individual content that you want to make sure maintains your analytic responsibility, but also adequately reflects the individual person that was being assessed in this report. You also, if maybe you don't like to generate things, maybe you want to monitor what's already being generated. Organizations would have a very challenging time reviewing every single session note. Good organizations allocate great effort to this, and in some cases, great cost. But what if instead of monitoring 10 or 15% of your notes, what if you monitored 100% of them, and then they flagged them for you so that you could put real eyes on the ones that were flagged with rules you generated? Meaning it's not a black box. What's happening here? You participated in the development for your organization. It's not generating anything for you. It's monitoring what was already generated to help you look at everything and draw your attention with much more precision to the things that are there. If you monitor 15% of your notes, let's say, well, it's not like you get to monitor only the 15% that didn't meet your standard. You're missing things. And we know this. We know this collectively. We know we miss things. Well, it doesn't mean we're not going to miss things. That's not, I don't think perfection is the goal. Progress, however, I do think is there. And why wouldn't we explore, again, personal advocacy in this point, why wouldn't we at least explore if we feel comfortable looking at those kinds of things? And where can we help parents or our staff? More adoption effort. It takes some time and takes quite a bit of time to build these tools, whether they're chatbots in support of your RBT for not only giving them a helping hand whenever they need it, but also gives the supervisor tools of what kind of questions are my RBTs asking? How can I better service them? How can I better make sure that our upcoming staff meeting is not just on content that I think is interesting, but is actually meeting the demands of the moment? And I can monitor that in real time. Goodness, it looks like a lot of staff are asking about these types of preference assessments. Well, let's bring somebody in. Let's use some internal expertise inside of this and look at that together as a group. And then you've got all the way up at the top, some analytic tools, high development cost, perhaps high adoption effort. Maybe we're not there yet in terms of what that looks like, because we want to be really clear about the guardrails. But think about all of the learning that occurs throughout all of this that helps get us there. I think if you go straight to this, personal opinion about to come in, that's probably, I don't know, that doesn't feel as prudent of a way of developing towards there. But that's not to suggest that someone isn't doing that out there. In our remaining time, let's take a little bit of introspection. This is also, by the way, what ChatGPT thinks behavior analysts look like. I just said, can you give me a picture of a behavior analyst looking in the mirror? And this is the picture that it gave me. And some behavior analysts look like that. But what are we bound by? Well, whether it's the adoption of a technological tool or an adoption of a new procedure that's been validated inside of an experimental setting, shows promising results, but has not yet been demonstrated with efficacy inside of an applied environment. Anytime we adopt new things, which we should, right? I mean, if science is evolving and developing, I think they're science, that's kind of thing. We have to maintain our competency. And as the discipline refines, our competency needs to refine as it goes along with that. We have our values, our ethics, our responsibilities, but values and ethics and responsibilities change. Our responsibilities will change when conditions are such that they change. Ethics change. The BACB, although that's not the only ethical code, but it's the one we would orient to the most. At the BACB, they spend a great deal of time refining our ethics to meet the moment and also serve us and protect the consumers as things change. And we have our values. They're not laid out like they might be at your organization. Maybe you painted them on the wall or something like that. It was kind of cool to do. But there are things that we organize around accountability and an individualized approach to care, our commitment to science, conceptual coherency, parsimony. Maybe those might be some values that we share as a collective. Those things can change, but having a strong vantage, maintaining a really strong and rigorous parameters around how we want to employ anything new is going to behoove us. And I think we can do so ethically, and I think we can do so with care and in keeping in mind of those that we serve. If we want to look into a deeper dive of our ethics code, we can do that. I've kind of cherry-picked a few of these in section 1, being truthful. Obviously, being truthful goes back to the transparency side of things. Obviously, we've got professional requirements and legal requirements. Cultural responsiveness and diversity, we've talked about. There are biases in these large language models. We need to make sure that we do not relinquish our responsibility in interacting with those models. Certainly in section 2, providing effective treatment. Now, is an LLM going to provide effective treatment? No, you're going to provide and be in service of and in combination with others in effective treatment. But if you're leveraging a large language model that you can demonstrate, puts you in a position to provide more effective treatment based on these measures. I say these measures because perhaps your outcome measures are in-house and you won't preserve them. So I'm saying in general state. Protecting confidential information. Passing PHI around is not a game. And He's like, yeah, no, it's not a game, Tim. God, a profound statement. But I can only speak from CentralReach's perspective because I don't know it out, but I assume others have to conform to the same rules and regulations too. It is a no mess around thing. It's taken incredibly seriously. And because medicine has really paved the way of this, when we look to work with a large language model, Claude, or we want to have a relationship with OpenAI or something like that, they already are ready and willing to do that. They are clear, transparent about what that looks like. These are the parameters that it adheres to. These are the regulatory standards that it meets. This is the way it can interact with your system. These conversations have gone very smoothly. They're not, and in some cases, when they don't meet that moment, because it's an organization that is really developing very rapidly, us participating and working with them helps them get faster to that so that they can build their platform to better serve other use cases in that regard. Obviously, there's a lot of documentation side of things in section 3 and 4 and creating these systems, what the actual document is, where it is housed, stored and disposed of. It's not like ethical guidelines are always necessarily very clear, but in the development of these systems, until we know otherwise, we have to be clear and transparent about its use, but they can be incorporated into the development of these systems. Does not mean you are not responsible for what is drafted in a case of a documentation side of thing or what's monitored. We also have aspects inside of our public statements and research activities that, people have had to retract papers because they irresponsibly used large language models. They cheated. And we don't like cheaters. That's not cool. If people are using these to make public statements, public-facing materials, that can be problematic. We want to be very, very careful with those usage. And so we do have ethical responsibilities that bound the development of these things. Our last secret word here is transparency. Transparency. Perspective, continuum, transparency. Those are your 3 words. That's what I'm going to leave you with. We don't have times for questions. Do have some references. Please reach out to me, tim.fuller@centralreach.com. I'd be happy. Thank you very much for your time today. And hopefully I get to chat with you soon. Bye now.